For every amazing success like Grand Theft Auto, there's at least one video game project that turns out so poorly that it damages the industry as a whole. Video game failures can manifest in many ways, from projects that make huge promises and fail to deliver, to highly promoted titles that are just never released. Abject failure transcends simply sucking at ventures beyond, ruining reputations and lives, resulting in a massive loss of revenue and dignity, and if you're lucky, the highly public end of a career. Here are a few video game projects that were most anticipated but still failed miserably. Medal of Honor: Rising Sun. After the success of Kong, every war game series was releasing their own jungle-themed game. To no surprise, EA decided to have the next Medal of Honor set in the Pacific Theater. Gamers were to take on the role of USMC Corporal Joseph Griffin during the Pacific Theater. Among the battles to be featured were the attack on Pearl Harbor, fall of Manila, and the raid on Guadalcanal. The game was to also feature a side story that involved the OSS trying to find stolen gold. This being a Medal of Honor game, the hype and expectations were big. It's understandable if game fails to live up to the hype, yet it felt like no effort was put into making of Medal of Honor: Rising Sun. The game was banned for its weak single player that was riddled with glitches and bad AI. To date, Medal of Honor: Rising Sun is the lowest reviewed game in the series. Kane and Lynch Deathman. A game develops hype in two ways. Either the creative team does an abundance of interviews with the press or pay for enough ads to flood every media format. Eidos Interactive chose the latter to build the needed hype for Kane and Lynch Deathman. Unfortunately, the result of Kane and Lynch Deathman varied. Kane and Lynch Deathman will forever go down in history as one of the most controversial games of all time. It was the eye of the notorious curseman Kate Storm, slap bang in the middle of an event that exposed the problems between game reviewers and marketing departments, when GameSpot writer Jeff Kurtzman lost his job following a negative review of Eidos' third-person shooter. There is no doubt that the game will forever be linked with Jeff Kurtzman and his review, and there is also no doubt that opinions of the game itself were tarnished by the controversy. The Xbox 360 version of the game has an unimpressive 65 on Metacritic. Just Cause. This was one of those games that had a good concept but terrible execution. Just Cause has Rico Rodriguez working to overthrow a South American dictator by waging a guerrilla war alongside rebel factions. However, its clunky function along with poor control setup earned it mediocre reviews from critics and gamers. It also failed to stand out from games like Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. All the game needed was a little polishing, and it paid off with an iconic sequel. Just Cause 2 kept the premise of the original but had smoother controls and gave players a more reliable gaming experience. Gamers fell in love with Just Cause 2 so much that a group of dedicated fans created a multiplayer function that received the blessing of the game's developers. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Based on Steven Spielberg's popular 1982 movie of the same name and reportedly coded in just 5 weeks, this Atari 2600 game was rushed to the market for the 1982 holiday season. Despite selling 1.5 million copies, the sales figures came nowhere near Atari's expectations. It had ordered production of 5 million copies, and many of the sold games were returned to Atari for refunds by consumers who were dissatisfied with the game. It had become an urban legend that Atari had dumped the unsold cottages of E.T. and other games in a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. This was confirmed in 2014 when the site was allowed to be excavated, with former Atari personnel affirming they had dumped about 800,000 cottages, total including E.T. and the other poorly selling games. The financial figures and business tactics surrounding this product are emblematic of the video game crash of 1983 and contributed to Atari's bankruptcy. Atari paid $25 million for the license to produce the game, which further contributed to a debt of $536 million, which is equivalent to $1.33 billion today. The company was divided and sold in 1984. Pac-Man. The home version of the highly popular Pac-Man arcade game was eagerly anticipated, but was a commercial disappointment for Atari. Despite being a best-selling game, the game was rushed to make the 1981 Christmas season. In 1982, Atari created 12 million cottages, even though there were only 10 million Atari 2600 sold at the time. In hopes of the game boosting system sales, Pac-Man did sell close to 7 million cottages, but consumers and critics alike gave it low rating. The high number of unsold units, which was over 5 million, coupled with the expense of a large marketing campaign, led to large losses for Atari. This game and E.T. are often blamed for sparking the video game crash in 1983. Shortly after the disappointment of Pac-Man, Atari reported a huge quarterly loss, promoting parent company Warner Communications to sell the division off in 1984. Atari never regained a prominent position in the home console market. Enter the Matrix. In the early 2000s, The Matrix was a thought-provoking film that encompassed elements of religion and philosophy in a Terminator-style setting, so it was obvious gamers would be a group obsessed with this film. Enter the Matrix was to be a side story to The Matrix Reloaded, as gamers take on the role of either Ghost or Neo, two main characters from the film. Unlike other movie games, Enter the Matrix was an expansion of the film. It included live-action scenes written and directed specifically for the game by the Wachowski brothers. Yet, like most movie games, Enter the Matrix was met with negative reviews. Gamers were upset that they had to play as a bunch of sidekicks and not Neo. Critics banned it for its bugs and glitches along with its poor tie-in. On the bright side, The Matrix Reloaded was a great movie. Superman. French developers Taito Software have the dubious honor of being responsible for this precipitously rushed-to-sale title that nevertheless managed to both manufacture a great deal of excitement and anticipation for the game, while simultaneously leaving a trail of broken hearts in its wake. Superman was plagued with basic control problems, production delays, and serious technical issues from the beginning of development, problems which unfortunately were not even close to being resolved when it was released in 1999 for the Nintendo 64 system. Gamers immediately noticed a green cloud that seemed to waft over certain parts of the game, which was initially described by Nintendo as kryptonite fog, but was in reality just a major visual malfunction that hadn't been corrected. This was emblematic of how badly this game needed more time to work out its innumerable bugs before being blasted into the annals of history for all the wrong reasons. The Man of Steel video game turned out to be a glitch-prone waste of time that couldn't showcase either its own merits or those of N64. Although its expedited development meant that it didn't cost Titus a bundle to make, the game absolutely tanked with critics and gamers alike, and was a huge disappointment at the cash register, to the tune of double-digit millions of dollars. Daikatana. Developed by Ion Storm as a combination FPS and RPG, the game was released in 2000 after much fanfare for the N64 and PC platforms. The game was the story of a future martial arts instructor in Japan in 2455 AD, seeking an ancient magical sword in a dystopian and soulless world ruled by despotic corporate overlords. Despite nearly 3 years in development, the game was not well received to say the least, with critics complaining of a convoluted and inconsistent storyline, monotonous battle sequences, intolerable and frequent cutscenes, and little in the way of any advancements in graphics or gameplay that lived up to its considerable hype. The game's history was storied, with original developer Ion Storm being bought out in 1999 by Eidos, which had already pumped $25 million into the project. Having eventually sold a disappointing 200,000 copies, Daikatana almost certainly lost considerably more, and became known as one of the epic industry failures of all time. Driver. Developed by Atari and Reflection Interactive, this was to be the greatly advanced console third title sequel to the highly successful original Driver game for PCs in 1999 and its successor Driver 2. Driver 2 had improved so impressively on its predecessor's innovation and open-world experience that this third incarnation had built enormous expectations for the game. The heat was really on for the developers to deliver, as their chief industry rival Rockstar Games was enjoying wild success with each new installment of their massively popular Grand Theft Auto series. Finally released in 2004, after nearly 5 years of tinkering, Driver was almost immediately universally panned. Gamers complained bitterly about its minimal 3-hour single-player mode, the agonizingly frustrating controls, the jerky, disjointed movements of the character outside a vehicle, and its overall total failure to improve on the franchise in even the most minute way. How bad was it? In 2005, Atari reported a quarterly loss of $16.9 million for the 6-month period following the release of Driver, and the game became a legendary cautionary tale for the industry. Grand Theft Auto. A game series doesn't become a cultural landmark without going through some trial and error. The series started as an innocent racing game titled Race and Chase, before a glitch convinced DMA to create what is known as Grand Theft Auto. The game was a success on PC, but failed to gain the attention of console gamers, and received mediocre ratings. Grand Theft Auto 2 did no better. This would have been the end of the series unless real changes were made. Grand Theft Auto 3 took the concept of its predecessors and incorporated it into a 3D environment. The result transformed the video game world, moving it from being a niche culture towards becoming part of popular culture. Its success was followed with Grand Theft Auto Vice City, along with Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which broke its predecessor's records and raised the bar for the gaming industry. At the same time, the concept of open-world gaming became one of the most popular genres. The legacy of the series has not ended, as the 2013 release of Grand Theft Auto V sold over $1 billion in 3 days, making it the fastest-selling title of all time. The PS4 and Xbox One ports were released in late 2014.